Hey guys, Mr. McKinney here. Just going through the derivative rules. We're going to start out with the trig rules and then just go over all the other rules we've covered so far this year. You need to make a cheat sheet. So I'm going to take a daily grade on this next class period. If you've already done that, you just need to add a couple of rules to it. If you have not done that yet, then it's going to be a daily grade. So you need to make sure you're making a separate cheat sheet that has all these derivative rules on it. Either put it on the front cover of your notebook if you can write on that, or just get a separate sheet of paper where you put all of the derivative rules in one place. All right, so the only ones that we're adding that are new today are really these last two, secant and cosecant. So if you start with secant, the derivative of secant turns into secant tangent. And if you start with cosecant, the derivative turns into negative cosecant cotangent. Now, these two were covered in one of Mr. Jansen's videos. So tangent goes to secant squared, cotangent goes to negative cosecant squared. You should already know sine and cosine. Sine goes to cosine, cosine goes to negative sine. If you already have your cheat sheet with all the other rules, you're now done. If you never made a cheat sheet, then get a separate sheet of paper, and we're going to go through all the rules. Before we do that, I'm going to give you guys the ways that I remember these different rules that we've got here. So first of all, sine and cosine kind of go together. So when you start with sine, it turns into cosine. Start with cosine, it turns into negative sine. So you just need to remember whether to switch the sign or not. If you start with cosine, you switch the sign, as in positive or negative, to negative sign. Now, there's some patterns down here for the other four. So first of all, if you look at the original functions and the derivatives, tangent and secant are going to show up together. So tangent turns into secant squared, and when you start with secant, the derivative is secant tangent. So tangent and secant are kind of paired together. They're going to show up in each other's derivatives. And at the same idea, cotangent and cosecant are kind of paired together. So cotangent turns into negative cosecant squared. Cosecant turns into negative cosecant cotangent. The other thing to notice is that when you start with cotangent or cosecant, those are the ones that end up with negatives. So cosine, cotangent, cosecant, the three functions that start with a c all have a negative in the derivative. The three functions that start with either an s or a t don't have a negative when you take the derivative. So those are just some ways to help memorize them. You do need to memorize all these formulas in addition to all the other derivative formulas. They're not going to give you any of these on the AP exam. All right, so we've covered this slide before. If you start out with a constant, the derivative is 0. You're allowed to just bring a constant multiplier down to the derivative. So for example, if my original function is 4 sine of x, the derivative is just 4 cosine of x. I can bring that 4 down. That's what this constant multiplier is saying, that the constant, if it's multiplied, can just be brought down. Linear functions, the slope is the derivative, because that's what derivative means. It means slope. Power rule is the one you use more than anything else. So if you have x to the power of something, bring the exponent and multiply it in front, and then drop the exponent by 1. So power rule you'll use the most. You are allowed to add or subtract derivatives, and then these were the first two trig rules that we learned. If you have two functions that are being multiplied, you have to use the product rule. So if you see two things multiplied and there's a variable in both, then you're going to want to use the product rule. If you see two things divided and there's a variable in both, you're going to want to use the quotient rule. Now keep in mind that sometimes you can avoid these rules by simplifying at the start. Either multiply things out at the start or divide things out at the start. And you can go back and watch those videos. But if both of these have a variable, you need to use product rule or quotient rule. If only one of them is a variable, then it's really just the constant multiplier, so you don't need to use the product rule. All right, chain rule. If you don't understand chain rule, you're going to have difficulty passing the AP exam. So if you have one function inside of another function, so if you have a composition of functions, you need to use the chain rule. So you need to be able to apply it, and you need to be able to just write down the chain rule. So f prime of g of x times g prime of x. Take the derivative of the outside one first without touching the inside, and then multiply by the derivative of the inside function. For e to the x and ln of x, again, ln just means log base e of x, so this is a logarithmic function. E to the x turns into e to the x. Now, you can copy these yellow ones down if you want, but they're really just these rules with the chain rule applied. So you don't necessarily need to copy these ones down. If you want to, if it makes it easier for you, then go ahead and copy them down. But if you're good at using the chain rule, you really just need to memorize the top two rules. And then if you did not copy these down at the start, I put them all down here again at the end for those of you guys that were making your cheat sheet from scratch. So again, have all of these formulas into a single place for a daily grade next time. Should be an easy 100. I really hope you guys do it. Have a great day.